On this episode of Locked On Angels, what's the word around the league about the Angels from those who watch the team and report on the team? We're going to share that with you. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is, and yes, we are. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SiriusXM by searching Locked On Angels. And if you'd like to give back to the Super Halo Bros for all this Super Halo content, here's some things that you can do. Leave us a rate and a review on Apple Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe and become a Locked On everydayer. And whether you're watching or listening, come over to YouTube, leave a comment. It's one of the best ways to get in touch with us and be a part of the conversation. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Booking.com. Booking.yeah, the right stay can make you a fan in any city, including your rival city. Check out Booking.com for your stay today.
Happy Friday to you, and thanks for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Hey, it's our third season here at Locked On Angels, talking Angels baseball with you Monday through Friday, every single weekday. On today's show, we're looking around the world of baseball to see what people have to say about our favorite team, the Angels, and those who watch baseball, those who report on baseball, and maybe even report on other teams as well. We're going to get into all of that. Mike, let's start with Sam Blum of The Athletic. He wrote an article just the other day, kind of had some takeaways from the Angels' first half. Why don't you get us started?
Yeah, he talked about three specific takeaways, Johnny. He talked about growth for young players. He talked about some regression for other players. He specifically mentioned Zach Neto, and he said that his 733 OPS is mostly in line where he was last season pre-injury. His defensive metrics have improved in some areas, but most importantly, he's been available every single day, and he's taken on a more vocal leadership role. It was important to solidify himself as an everyday big leaguer this year. And according to Sam, he said he's doing just that.
You mentioned Logan O'Hoppe, said arguably the leader of the team, improving defensively and offensively. Mentioned Jose Soriano and Ben Joyce. Soriano turning into a legit starting pitcher. Ben Joyce could take over closing duties when and if Carlos Estevez is traded. Then he mentioned Joe Adell, Mike. He said the 190 batting average and 29.5% strikeout rate are just not sustainable for an everyday player. His defense has improved, but not enough to offset his offense and base running. In the same breath, he kind of mentioned Mickey Moniak's 576 OPS this season. Hasn't been the same player since 2023 that he was in 2023. One of the second takeaways that Sam here had, he mentioned, was the Angels have way too many flyers, taking flyers on, recovery projects or veterans or things like that. So here's what he had to say. He said the Angels have used 66 players in each of the 22 and 23 seasons. They've already used 48 this year, and that's before the All-Star game. Unsurprisingly, that's also tied with the White Sox and A's, for most in the American League. Strickland, Pilar, Krause, Fulmer, Calhoun, they've all filled important roles. Veterans having bounce-back seasons is always a fun storyline. The Angels deserve kudos for finding some diamonds in the rough, but there's ample evidence over the last 3 years to suggest that the lack of depth will not lead to sustained success.
And he also mentioned the two big names on the Angels, Mike Trout and Anthony Rendon, who haven't contributed really at all this season. And he said it's hard to blame either too much considering they've been injured, but baseball is about posting and being available. Amen. Right? Like we want to see them on the field. And neither of them have been available over the last 4 seasons that much. It's been more than 10 weeks, by the way, since Mike Trout had a meniscus surgery on his knee. That was May 3rd. And Rendon has missed nearly 3 months with a hamstring tear. And both of them together this season are making more than $73 million combined. And so the Angels are basically getting nothing out of that. So a lot of things that Sam had to say. Johnny, love your thoughts here. Fair assessment on the progress and the regression for the young guys? Let's start there.
Yeah, with the young guys, I think Sam does have a fair assessment of those young guys. Obviously, I feel like you and I are more hyped on the young guys than probably Sam is as a neutral bystander, a neutral reporter. But the truth of the matter is this, Mike. Neto has improved. Logan O'Hoppe has improved. It's great to see Jose Soriano learning how to be a starter. Ben Joyce looks like he's finally figured out how to get the most out of his velocity by adding that splinker, so he has something to play off the velocity. So great areas of improvement there. I think I'm just as frustrated with Joe Adell and Mickey Moniak as the next person. I'm not ready to launch them into the sun like some people want to, but I will say there's a reason you keep those guys around, hoping that they're going to find something. And I think that the Angels can do that with Joe Adell and Mickey Moniak. I understand 190 batting average looks awful, but I mentioned it yesterday. Joe Adell, home run leader on the team, second most RBIs. There's a reason why you look at that and you go, yeah, we can work with that. We can figure something out. Really, it kind of comes down to what's Johnny Washington doing to help Joe Adell figure things out at the plate? What's he doing to help Mickey Moniak figure things out at the plate? I kept saying it yesterday. The highs are very high and the lows are very low. Mike, did he have a fair assessment of Trout and Rendon? What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, he looked at them and said, well, it's not necessarily their fault that they haven't been able to contribute because they've been injured.
Yeah.
And he's right. He's absolutely right. It's just really frustrating as fans. And because he is a reporter, he's got to remain neutral, right? And so I appreciate that he was like, the Angels aren't getting much from two guys that are making $73 million combined this year, and they haven't really gotten much from them in the last 4 years.
They could pay us to do what they're doing on the field for 73. You and I would take it. We could take it at half that price.
I'll take it. I've never missed a softball game, so I'm in. and I think that the conversation about the too many flyers is an interesting one, John.
Yeah,
the Angels already have 48 players, and they have, in the last 2 years, they've used 66 players. I think that when you're a team that's trying to build something, there are moments where you're going to take flyers on guys to be a backup, like a Jake Marisnick when they signed them in the offseason, like a Willie Calhoun, right? But if you're a team that's building towards something, a part of what you need is a consistent core. I like that the Angels have a consistent core, but I'm also with him in, I'm a little unsettled by this too many flyer conversation. If it was a 2-year process and the Angels were doing that, okay. But doesn't it feel like this has been the Angel narrative for the last 10 years where they've brought in guys, or, hey, this guy's a free agent, or, hey, this guy was DFA'd and maybe we can pick him up? It feels like that seems to be, at least the 3 seasons that we've done Locked On Angels and the 1 season that we did Super Halo Bros, it felt like that's the conversation that kind of rose and bubbled to the surface every single time we talked about this team.
Yeah, to me, the idea that taking too many flyers on guys equals a lack of depth, there's truth to that. At the same time, this is the depth. The flyers are the depth.
Yeah,
you got Willie Calhoun and Hunter Strickland so that when your major league guys get hurt, inevitably and unfortunately, you have them to bring up and do these things for you. I really look, the number doesn't look great. 66 last year, the year before, 48 already this year. But the idea here is you sign a Willie Calhoun or a Kevin Pillar when Mike Trout gets hurt so that they can do the things that they've been doing. Now, it doesn't always work out that way, but the idea is that you get at least somebody who's league average and can hit 250 and, and keep the line moving for you, because you're not going to replicate Trout's stats at the plate. You're not going to be able to do that. At the same time, you got to go somewhere for these guys. And that's why you do go after these veteran flyers. You do go after these guys. Mike, in the same breath, I think it's unwise. Let me use this example. Maybe like 2 years ago, like you bring up a Jordan Adams and you need him to produce. Well, we kind of saw that with like Monte Harrison and guys who never really had been in the big leagues before. I understand teams go to their minor league depth to replace and restore their roster sometimes, but sometimes that's just, they're not ready. And especially in the Angels case, they're not ready. Or they got, like I said, Monte Harrison, or I'm trying to think of who else they had that year, but it was a lot of guys who didn't have a lot of major league experience getting major league experience, and it showed. And so I understand the idea that you want to develop your own depth and be able to reach into that, but nobody's really close to that. They kind of have to go this route. And I hear you when you say It's happened a lot in the last couple of years. But to me, I don't think too many flyers necessarily equals a lack of depth. I think this is just what you do sometimes. I don't know.
Well, two thoughts on that. One, it makes sense why it's been this way for the last few years because Trout and Rendon are always hurt.
Yeah,
and so
every year.
That's part of the reason why we're seeing more players come up. And then we just haven't had a consistent pitching staff that's been able to be a consistent pitching staff. And it hasn't been because of injuries. It's been because they've just sucked. We've had to send them down to work on some stuff too. But I think the second piece to this, Johnny, is what I will say about this roster and the Flyer guys this year is that they're better than what we've had in the past, because I know that you and I have had conversations about this team the last 2 years. And a lot of the guys that filled in the last 2 years weren't even average Major League Baseball players. Their WAR wasn't even at 0, right? Yeah. Like they weren't even average. And so the fact that we have these guys contributing, Willie Calhoun hitting a walk-off home run, and we have Kevin Pillar, who was playing out of his mind for a while, like that is so important to this team. And so I look at it through, I think, two perspectives. One, it'd be great to have a team that doesn't find itself on the IL all the time, especially our superstars.
No kidding.
But it would also be great to have a team where our depth does come in and step in and can play in a capable way and keep the team afloat. And we just haven't had that the last few years. I think this has been the first year that I can recall where the backup guys have really played solidly, right?
Yeah, you think about Calhoun and Pillar have no business doing what they have been able to do in the major leagues, right? Maybe Calhoun still has some unlocked potential there, but that's not anything you want to hang your hat on. Yeah. Kevin Pillar has been, I mean, gosh, there was a reason he was let go from the White Sox, and then he comes over here and just does what he does. I mean, that's not going to happen every time. Like I said, you want a guy with a WRC plus of 100, an OPS plus of 100. You want them to be league average or around there, 105, 95, that sort of thing. And the fact that the Angels have lucked out in that way is great. At the same time, I understand the idea of having a lack of depth, but I guess I just don't see the numbers being an issue. Like 66 players. Well, the truth is, if you're going to call up a minor leaguer, that also adds to your total, right? And so it is less about depth and more of this team can't stay healthy and stay on the field. And I think that's the bigger conversation to be had here. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. The Angels back at it tonight, baby. 6:40 Pacific time against the A's. You can catch every pitch of the Angels hometown broadcast on SiriusXM or the SXM app. All you got to do is search Angels. Coming up on Locked On Angels, will the Halos continue to rush their prospects to the majors, or will they wait and allow them to develop? We're going to talk about that coming right up.
Locked On Angels is brought to you by our new everydayers, Booking.com. Summer is here. It's time to travel. Maybe perhaps you want to travel and follow the Angels. You can do that with Booking.com. With hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, so much more on Booking.com. You might find just your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival city. Hotels that overlook the stadiums to family-friendly resorts. Booking.com has so many choices across the United States for wherever you travel, and the right stay can make you a fan in any city. So instead of trying to figure it out yourself, let our friends at Booking.com help you out. You can book today on their website or by downloading their app. Booking.com, Booking.yeah.
And today's show is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It's the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and favorite players. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You could turn $10 into $1,000. You just need to pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. You can add your favorite players all season long. You're not locked into one team or one player all season long like you are with regular fantasy baseball. Whether it's strikeouts or RBIs or first inning runs, take your pick of more or less and add them to your Prize Picks lineup today. And Prize Picks has Apple Pay for quick and easy payouts right into your account this season. So download the app today. Enter our code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, that's code LOCKEDONMLB, all lowercase, all one word, for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, and this is Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. This is your first listen of the day. We're grateful for that. Make your second listen the Locked On Sports Today channel. It's fantastic. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every single day, and it has some of the biggest stories in sports. Locked On Sports Today can bring all of the analysis that you need, the opinions that you need, the news that you need, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And the Angels are back playing the A's, 6:40 Pacific time, and you can catch every pitch of the Angels' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Angels.
Took myself out of the video. I don't know how I did that. Hey, Mike, Jeff Fletcher of the OC Register shared his thoughts at this halfway point. Jeff asked, how did they get here? How did I get here? Is what Jeff said about the Angels. How did they get here at this point? And this is what Jeff had to say. The Angels lost Shohei Ohtani, their best hitter and best pitcher last year, and they didn't replace him. Mike Trout and Anthony Rendon were hurt again for most of the first half. It could be worse because the starting rotation has also been disappointing. Other than all-star Tyler Anderson and a surprising first-year starter in Jose Soriano, no one has pitched up to their expectations. Mike, when it comes to how did they get here, is Jeff's assessment fair?
I think I would look at his assessment and I would say that those are obvious things that have happened. I would actually say, I think it could have been better, right? I think this season could have been better.
I was going to ask you, could it have been worse? Could it have been better? What do you say?
If Trout and Rendon are not out, I think that this team is hovering around 500, to be honest with you. If Reed Detmers doesn't fall apart, I think they're hovering around 500, to be honest with you. So I really had my ceiling was 500 for this team.
Yeah, same.
And the way that they played in June, I think, is the same way they could have played in April and in May. But then they lost everything and kind of fell apart at that moment. And is Trout and Rendon the game changers that help this team not look so terrible in those months? We'll never know.
Yeah, we'll never know.
when Rendon's in the lineup, the Angels seem to be better. And there were a lot of moments where the Mike Trout spot in the lineup came up and they weren't able to continue to move the lineup over. They ended up ending the inning. It was the grounding out and losing the game or whatever might have taken place. And so I think it could have been better. So the statements that Jeff makes are very, basic, reasonable, logical statements. But I think that this team could have been so much better had not a couple of things that have been happening the last few years hadn't happened this year, especially Mike Trout's injury and Anthony Rendon's injury.
I was glad he brought up Shohei Ohtani. Their best hitter, their best pitcher, they didn't replace him. And all offseason, we said, you got to go at least get yourself a starting pitcher, because if you're counting on health from Mike Trout and Anthony Rendon, obviously that's the ideal situation, is they're going to be there for 90% of the season. But we've just seen time and time again that that's not true.
Yeah.
And it keeps happening over and over and over again. I think it was foolish to not get a frontline starting pitcher. I know that there was a lot of talk about, well, who's coming up next year, and these guys aren't signing because they're Scott Boras clients and stuff like that. Like, we had those conversations.
Yeah.
At the same time, you just improved the bullpen, and then you crossed your fingers on, well, maybe Reed Detmers can hit 200 innings this year. He's never done that before. Maybe he can do that. Tyler Anderson's been in the league for a long time. He's never hit 200 innings, Mike. And so they just asked so much out of the guys that they had, while spouting the nonsense of, yeah, we're going to be in the season to compete. We're going to be competitive. It could have looked different had those guys stayed healthy. It could have looked different maybe with Robert Stevenson actually pitching this year and not missing out. And also not signing him because apparently there was an elbow issue they kind of knew about already because it was written into his contract.
Doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense. So to me, I appreciate Jeff's assessment of how did they get here, and not just on the Shohei level, but like all the areas that they needed to improve. They focused on the bullpen, and even that hasn't been great. And like I said, what did I say yesterday? They accidentally got this bullpen because it's Hunter Strickland, it's Hans Kraus, it's guys, it's Carson Fulmer, guys who weren't on the major league club to start the season are now here, and they're keeping them in the games. And a lot of these guys will probably be traded at the deadline, to be honest with you.
Right. Yeah.
So to me, it really could have been worse, as much as it could have been better. It's just a matter of you just didn't address anything that you needed to over the offseason, and you were just going to roll the dice. And like you said, at best, even if everybody played above their head and got better this year, it was like a 500 ceiling.
Yeah.
And that's why they find themselves where they are.
Now, Jeff did write about the keys to success for the second half, first half as well. He said manager Ron Washington has repeatedly said that his goal this year is for the team to get better each month. The most important thing is that their rotation gets stabilized. Ideally, both Reed Detmers and Chase Silseth will get their act together in AAA, and they'll contribute in the big leagues. And then Sam Bachman perhaps comes up from AA to join the mix. And also, is it too much to hope for that the Angels finish the season with Detmers, Silseth, Bachman, Soriano, and Canning in the rotation, all holding their own? That would really, I think, be an encouraging sign for the future, wouldn't it, John?
Yeah. So the big question here is, are the Angels improving each month according to Ron Washington's goal? Well, they did go 20-17 since June 3rd. That's from Jeff's article as well. So to me, are they improving each month? They certainly seem to be playing better baseball, is what I'll say. We're seeing a lot less of those frustrating little league mistakes. We're seeing less blowout games. I know that they've had some blowout games, like they had 11-0 loss against the Mariners, but then, the next three, they take the next three and they're playing competitive baseball.
Right.
And like you said, Mike, it's going to be like that all season long. But I will say, I feel like we're seeing less and less of those careless errors and those careless mistakes, or those bad baseball IQ mistakes. They have been plenty, and they still happen. I'm not saying they haven't all gone away, but I think, to me, an improvement is, well, at least Joe Adell didn't run himself into an out again, or you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. I think that the June record, finishing over 500 in June, was exciting. The problem then in July is that they fell apart the first few games, right? Like they're going to have to put some wins together to finish close to 500. They have 8 or 9 losses, I think, this month. I'll have to check the stats, but they're going to have to put some wins together to finish close to 500 by the end of the month. They can do that, right? They have an opportunity to do that. They're playing the A's, but they've already proven that they can sweep them and then get swept. And so I think that the consistency is really what I'll be looking for in the second half. And specifically with the rotation, John, Jeff Fletcher mentioned, like, is it realistic to see these guys be in the rotation and actually contribute, like Detmers and Silseth? Is it realistic to see them come back? Would you even bring them back? And would you even bring Sam Bachman up to be a part of this rotation?
I would like to see Detmers and Silseth back at some point. And Mike, they honestly might need to, out of necessity. If they do end up trading Tyler Anderson, they're going to need some arms in there. And it might be good for those guys to just get back into the role that they had. I'm sure that it's not great being down in AAA. I understand they're both down there trying to figure things out, and they haven't been doing too good if you look at the stat lines. But maybe there's a case where, look, nothing's going right for the Angels this season. Maybe you get them back up around Barry Enright, around the team, around the familiarity. Maybe that helps. Bachman coming up, to me, is another story. Perhaps he does come up and you give him a look. But by all accounts, he's having a really great season. I don't know if you want to mess with that. I kind of wonder if you let him finish out the season and then compete for a spot in spring training and see if he can get into the rotation next year. Maybe give him a look or two this season. But as far as bringing him up and having this full-time rotation, like Jeff Fletcher mentioned, I would wait and see if that's going to be the case for these guys, at least this season.
Everydayers, you can get supplies that's made for skilled trades at SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. You can shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands. And when you do, you'll get your order delivered right to your front door with fast shipping coast to coast. And if you need any help, they have expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business. And you can talk to a person every single time, no matter when you call. It's so great. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. You can join thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM, and you can order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com.
And today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. We love sports so much, we never want them to stop. I don't know about you, but waiting, as much as the Angels frustrate us, it's really hard to go a day without an Angel game, right?
I'm ready for a game right now.
Yeah, let's go. Look, when the sports aren't sporting, then we got to do something about it. And that's why FanDuel is here to keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app, dream up any bet, anytime you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all their customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
All right, so we talked about Sam Blum, we talked about Jeff Fletcher, but there are some people outside of the Angel aura.
We always hear from those guys. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. There are some people outside of the Angels aura that have been talking a bit about the Angels, specifically about trades. Johnny, why don't you get us started with what MLB.com said? Yeah,
Mark Feinsand of MLB.com wrote on July 3rd that as of July 2nd, the league average ERA for a starting rotation was 4.09, Mike. Listen to this. A figure lower than those of 2 division-leading clubs and 9 wildcard hopefuls. So the league average is lower than 2 clubs who lead their division and 9 wildcard teams.
Wow.
So Tyler Anderson and Carlos Estevez are among the top trade targets for contending teams. Mark Feinsand wrote. He wrote some kind of trade target articles for starting pitching and then 10 targets to watch for this trade deadline. And Feinsand wrote about Anderson and Estevez. So we're not the only ones thinking that they're going to get moved. Obviously, yeah, they seem pretty obvious when it comes to the moves that they should make. But Mike, there was a write-up from Patrick McAvoy writing for the New York Mets on SI. Why don't you tell us what he had to say?
Yeah, the Mets bullpen, he said, is their biggest weakness, but luckily there will be some options out there for the club to acquire ahead of the trade deadline. One of those great options would be Los Angeles Angels all-star hurler Carlos Estevez. He wasn't an all-star this year. He was last year. But he talked about how he would be a great option. And then, Johnny, you wrote an article.
I did.
That talked about the Mets potential trades, and you mentioned the Angels and Estevez as well, right?
Yeah, so I've been writing for Athlon Sports thanks to Lindsey Crosby for the opportunity, and it's given me a chance to cover some other teams, which is fantastic. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. Locked on Angels is the bread and butter, but I am excited to write and kind of look at other teams. So I did. Are the Mets buyers or sellers at the deadline? Mike, I think they have every reason to buy, and the bullpen is a huge part of that. So I think that Carlos Estevez would be a great fit for them. Is something wrong over there?
I'm looking for the email from Lindsay asking me to write an article. I don't see that anywhere.
You got to stop double spacing after all your words. Let's leave that back in the 80s. Come on. Hey, Josh Timmers of Bleed Cubby Blue. It's one of the SB Nation blogs for the Cubs. This was interesting to me. He said, at the risk of seeming like I'm picking over the corpse of the Angels, today's possible trade target, he said that because he also brought up Carlos Estevez.
Yeah.
He said today's possible trade target for the Cubs is Angels utility infielder Luis Rengifo. The Angels, I had to laugh at this. The Angels think they're going to compete for a title every year, no matter how ridiculously optimistic that is. So they'd want something big back. What is that? I don't know. And then he said James Triantos would be in the ballpark, maybe less than that, but not much less. Mike, he brought up James Triantos. Tell us about him, because it got me excited.
Yeah, he's 4th in the Cubs system per MLB Pipeline, 53rd in baseball in the top 100 prospects.
Ooh!
53rd, Johnny. He spent this year in Double-A in the Southern League, the same league as the Trash Pandas. He's primarily a second baseman, but has played some center field this year. Also played third base. Here's his slash line: 301 average, 341 on base, 448 slugging, and a 789 OPS, 17 doubles, 3 triples, 7 home runs, 30 stolen bases, got some wheels, 15 walks, and 34 Ks.
Yeah.
To 34 Ks.
Would you make that trade if Triantos was part of it? Would you want a package? Would you want just Triantos? What do you say?
I think I would want him and somebody else. Triantos and somebody else if I'm going to give up Rengifo, because Triantos can come over and maybe potentially play like a Rengifo, but you don't know. He hasn't proven himself. He's only been in Double-A. So I think I would need him and somebody else. What about you?
Yeah, I think I would want somebody to go along with that as well. Really, Mike, I want the Angels to extend Rengifo. That's my number one thing. But if they're not going to do that, they absolutely have to trade him. Finally, Steve Henson of the LA Times brought up a super interesting point. This is the name of his article. The Angels can field an entire lineup of first-round draft picks. So why can't they win? Listen to this. I don't know why this never really occurred to me. Matt Thaiss, first-round pick in 2016. Shawnuel, last year. Keston Hiura, 2017 with the Brewers. Zach Neto, 2022. Rendon, 2011 with the Nationals. Taylor Ward, number 1 pick in 2015. Mickey Moniak, number 1 pick in 2016 with the Phillies. Joe Adell, number 1 pick in 2017. Tyler Anderson, 2011 with the Rockies. Carson Fulmer, number 1 pick with the White Sox in 2015. Obviously, Mike Trout, 2009. Reed Detmers in 2020. And even Cole Tucker, who's in AAA, 2014 with the Pirates. Can we just stop for a second and think about how crazy that is? Actually? Like, I mean, you know it all the time. And as you see these guys, you kind of think like, oh yeah, number 1 pick. But to think that, no, that's almost the entire team is number 1 picks is just wild to me.
Yeah. And the reason why Henson brings this up is because there is an expectation that Christian Moore will be up with the big league club this season. He mentioned that shortly after the pick was made, Tim McElvain, who is the scouting director for the Angels, mentioned that the power hitting second baseman will benefit from being around Angels manager Ron Washington. I think once he gets in that environment, the way that Wash and his guys run everything, I think he's going to excel here. So, Johnny, Christian Moore, in the majors into this year, beginning of next year, are they rushing him?
Well, that's the thing is, if he's going to be around Ron Washington, it's either going to be this year or next year, because that's as far as Wash's contract goes, Mike.
Right.
And we don't know if there's plans beyond that. We don't know if Perry Manassian is going to be here beyond September, because Artie Moreno doesn't talk to anybody.
Right.
And for some reason, that's okay with some people. I don't get it, but I think that we should all have a problem with that. Are we rushing prospects again? Are the Angels... should they be doing it again? I don't know. I'm so tired of this conversation. Sometimes, like, we can't even get an honest assessment of the draft, because literally everybody was like, well, the Angels are just going to pick a college guy who's going to come up. And then they kind of did that. So I don't know. What do you say?
I think that if the strategy, we don't know what the strategy is publicly, but privately feels like the strategy is that we're just going to get a bunch of guys, a bunch of young guys, athletic guys, power guys, want to win type of guys, and we're going to get them to the major leagues as fast as possible, because there isn't a process of spending money and making sure that we're going to go and get these great free agents and bring them in. We're going to get maybe that one big free agent to try to flex on, hey, we got Rendon, or we got this person, or we got that person. But I think that the philosophy for Perry Manassian has been, I'm going to get my kind of guys on this roster, and then the strategy is I'm going to get them to the major leagues as fast as possible. Johnny, I'm okay with that if it means that they turn into Ohapi and Neto and Shawnuel. And if Christian Moore is fantastic, why not just have him come and play right now? I know that there's it's cool and sexy to say we got this guy marinating in the minor leagues. And I get all of that, but if they're just going to marinate in the minor leagues and we're going to go 20 games under 500, but having Christian Moore on the roster makes us more exciting, I'm going to do it. I want that right now. That's what I want as a fan.
Well, you bring up a good point. The reason why they're rushing these guys up is because they need good players on the team. And obviously that's not going to come from the payroll. It's not going to come from spending money in free agency, because history has shown that that's not what the Angels do. So in a way, I can't blame Perry Manassian for doing what he's doing. At the same time, if you're upset that he's rushing prospects up, which in some cases I am, but on the other case, hey, they've shown some reservation with Caden Dana. Hey, they've shown some reservation with Reed Detmers, letting him figure things out in the minors and not going, oh man, we're out of pitchers, we need somebody back. Like, they've shown some restraint in doing so. And that comes down to baseball people making baseball decisions. But when it comes to spending money in free agency, I can't give my hopes up. I love doing the predictions that you and I do for free agency, or the things that what we would do, but they just never come to fruition because it's so beyond out of reach for what Artie Moreno wants to do that you end up in a situation like this where Perry Manassian wants to bring up his talent as soon as possible.
Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. The Angels are back playing the A's, 6:40 Pacific time tonight. Catch every pitch of the Angels' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. All you got to do is search Angels.
Hey, give us a follow on Twitter at Locked On Angels and at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. Whether you're watching or listening, come on over to YouTube, get into the comment section, hit that like button and subscribe button on the way down there. It's the best way to get in on the conversation. Mike, what do we have on deck for Monday's show?
We're here to recap all 3 games against the A's on Monday. We'll give you the details.
Oh, wait.
Come on. There it is. Can't wait for Monday. Hopefully they won't have that many fans where they don't have people banging on things. But we'll recap all the games this weekend on Monday on Locked On Angels.
We're going to play the ATHs, Mike. Did you see that on the schedule for next year? That's super silly. All right, friends. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday. Until then, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Thanks for being here with us, and we'll see you back here on Monday.
You mentioned that writer with the last name Timmers, and all I could think of, we are the Timmers.
We are the Timmers.
Boy Meets World.